Britton for our author interview. And I will just go ahead and let him take it away and introduce himself.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Wesley Britton, and to try to consolidate my life for you in 150 words or less or something like that, it's going to be a tad tricky. I'm the author, really, of 10 books, well, 11 if you count my poetry volume. Four of them were nonfiction books on TV spies and movie spies and literary spies. Six of my books, however, are the Beta Earth Chronicles, which are a science fiction series. But I've been writing since, oh, goodness gracious, forever. I guess about 1983, I started getting published. For many years, it was mostly scholarly articles when I was going to grad school, getting my PhD, things on Mark Twain and American literature. And I started cranking out encyclopedia articles and then book reviews. I'm still doing book reviews like crazy. I've also been a co host of an online radio show where I interviewed celebrities from music and literature and television and well, rock and roll, lots of those folks. But that show we dropped that 2015 went as far as we could go with that. Taught English at various community colleges in Texas, Oklahoma, and up here in Pennsylvania for like 33 years before 2015 rolled around and I decided to retire. That's the Whirlwind tour. What else would you like to know?
Hey, you've been busy.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Tell us more about your books.
Well, I don't want to say too much about the old spy books, although it's kind of weird. The other day, I got a new review for my Encyclopedia of TV Spies, which came out in 2009. And it really wowed me that somebody would still find value in a book. To me, it seems awfully old, but apparently not to some. But the sci-fi series, the Beta Earth Chronicles, I've been working on. It seems like forever. They've been coming out from Bear Manor Media since 2015, and it's all about. Well, it starts off with a character from our planet, Alpha Earth, who is drug across to another planet called Beta Earth, and he's blinded in the capture. So on the other side, he's a guy stuck on a different planet. He doesn't know the language. He doesn't know what's going on. The folks over there want to conduct scientific experiments on him and find out what's going on, what makes him tick. So he's pretty much tortured for a long time before, well, all kinds of stories and events happen, and he eventually escapes from that. And he's on a planet where there's a plague that destroys 3 out of 4 male babies their first year. So polygamy is the norm. So he gets up into a country where he's free and starts to collect his wives and go through, well, 20 years of adventures, the entire Renburn family, as they move around the globe, going from country to country, encountering dilemma after dilemma. It's a fairly complex book. Some folks who've read it, or books, think of it more as anthropology and sociology than science fiction because it is pretty terrestrial. There's no robots, there's no exotic weaponry or anything like that. Well, there is some, but very little. But it's mostly about characters, about personal interactions, and about how problems. And well, does that answer your question?
Yes, it sounds pretty complex. You got a lot
Mhm.
going on in that series.
I'm delighted to say that it's pretty dense. I know that kind of puts off some people, but no, it's just what I wrote. What can I say?
Now you've talked about your science fiction series and your older books. You said were mystery.
Well, no, no,
Uh,
spies,
Spies,
espionage.
espionage. There you go. Are there any other genres that you like to branch out to, or do you just kind of stick to the ones that you're most comfortable with?
In terms of reading, I read everything. In terms of writing, I don't know what's next. I did just write a novella that's about how members of my characters, their children, come back to our planet in the future and end up writing a murder mystery. I've never read one of those before, But that's a short story. That, by the way, anybody listening, should you, I guess you could go to my Beta Earth Chronicles Facebook page or go to my website. So there's a webmaster puts it up, or my Goodreads page. There's a link to where you can sign up to get a newsletter that we're putting together that should come out as soon as we get 200 subscribers. And if you become a subscriber, then you get a copy of that murder mystery I was just telling you about. It's a short story, about 20 pages long, but I don't feel like I'm limited to what I can write about. It's just that's where I've been at for a while, and then who knows what happens next. I refuse to predict what will happen to me because as soon as I get one thing going, that ends, and I start something else.
That's good. I'm a firm believer in just kind of trying new things.
Yeah, oh
Just
yeah,
to see, if it works for you. It may not work for you, but you may learn something in the process. So it couldn't possibly hurt you
oh,
to try something new.
always, always, always learning.
Which was your favorite book to write so far?
Oh, that has to be The Blind Alien, the first of the Beta Earth Chronicles, because that was such a surprise. It was one of those books. Well, actually, the first four books of the series, I almost feel like I didn't write. They feel like they came to me.
I can relate to that.
It was just like I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, here comes this story, and here's come these characters, and here come these settings, and here come these conflicts, and I just, for a long time, I thought I was just entertaining myself. I didn't really think about writing them down and then putting them out there as books. But eventually, well, I started trying to frame them as books. And I started thinking about different ways to take these concepts and write them in a brand new way. If you get a hold of a copy of, well, you should start with The Blind Alien because they are kind of books that are different. They're not really standalone books. Well, Blind Alien is. Um, their style is very, 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 very original and very, very unique. For one thing, it's all told in alternating points of view from the main characters. Everything's in the first person. So you first hear from the words of Bartine at the beginning, and then you hear from Malcolm Renburn. And then as other characters come into the mix, you hear their voices mixed in. And I tried to do my best to create a dialect for on the other planet. Usually in science fiction, you kind of have this problem of kind of come with new vocabulary for machines or places or things like that. I wanted them to sound different from what we do. So I in active voice phrases instead of I was surprised, I surprised, I stunned, I amazed, cut out a lot of those little words. And I don't think, instead of that, I think not. And trying to make it, give it a different rhythm, give it a different cadence, so that as you read it, it should be easy to read once you get into the cadence of it. But it does surprise people at the start, and that's what it's trying to do. Because if you're going to do science fiction, I think try to be original, try to be surprising, try to do the unexpected. No reason to go down the same old templates and formulas and paint by number kind of things that are all over the place.
Yeah, and that's true with all genres too.
Yeah,
It
I
sounds like
try.
you put a lot of thought and time into your alien dialects. That's great. That can be a really difficult thing to try to do. Is to try
Yeah,
to have an entirely new language, or as you said, just to have different ways that it's presented.
yeah. To add to the mix, since I had a number of different characters with a lot of different backgrounds, I tried to think of ways. I'm not so sure I was too successful at this. At least no reviewer has said anything about it. Is to make them sound different, even if they're all using the same basic dialect. Like I have one character who's very earthy, very, well, just down to earth, a farm girl. So I wanted her to sound much simpler. I be, instead of I be the simple one. So she would sound different from the more educated women on the planet. But everybody's noticed that yet. I haven't heard about it, but yeah, yeah, you're right. A whole lot of thought into that jigsaw puzzle.
It sounds like it, but the more time you put into something like that, the more original and real it feels.
I think I hope so.
What do you love the most about the writing process itself?
The surprises when you go places you didn't think you were going to go. You're sitting here and you're crafting out this scene, and the next thing you know, you're in a place and you had no idea that you were going there. I have to admit that sometimes I got to go back and cut out stuff because sometimes you can go off, a tendency, spring a tangent and provide a lot more detail than is really necessary for the storyline. I guess that's one of the saddest things is to go back through and just whack, 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 cut, cut, cut. And if it doesn't contribute to the story, we don't need it, get rid of it. Until you come across an editor who says, hey, you need some more description here. Oh, well, okay. Go back around and put stuff back in or create new descriptive stuff. But being surprised, I think it was easily what I love the most about those books.
It's a good answer. I don't think I've heard that answer before.
Okay.
What do you hate about it, or maybe not hate, but what do you dread? What do you not look forward to when it's time to sit down and write it all out?
I don't hate really anything about the writing process other than, I guess, getting interrupted while you're trying to work. What I hate is at the other end when you've got this manuscript, getting it out there, getting it to a publisher, getting it to an editor, and then after that, getting it out to the readers. That whole process of selling books just drives me nuts. I guess it drives us all nuts,
Oh, yes.
especially in this ridiculously competitive world we live in now, where virtually everybody who wants to write a book does. I think anybody who reads science fiction thinks they write science fiction. So, we got, what is it, 50,000 new books on Amazon a day?
Wow.
That's, quite a tide to swim in against. That's the part that drives me most nuts, trying to find the readers.
It is difficult. Could you give us examples of where or when do you find inspiration for your stories?
Everywhere, everywhere, especially reading. Well, for example, this novella that I've been working on this last year, I took the characters and I sent them up to British Columbia where they would live with what the Native American culture, the First Nation culture, will be like 40 years from now. Well, so I started looking around for novels and nonfiction books about that area and looking for books and readings that talked about the impact of global warming will have on the planet. And out of all of that, you get little bits from here, little bits from there, little descriptive things about the animals and what will be surviving or what won't be, or things about plant life or, in forest and um, what kinds. Okay, if the Indian tribes will probably have shrunk, everybody will have shrunk the way I've got the book set up. What will the impact of all these events happen to people and the environment? And that get little bits and pieces. Well, here's a weird one for you. As I mentioned earlier about the blind alien, I said I had them alternating voices. I got that idea from the print version of the Beatles anthology.
Oh,
Four
really?
different, yeah, the four different Beatles would tell. You hear from John, then you hear from Paul, then you hear from Ringo, as they tell their story back and forth. Well, that gave me the framework to really start the whole thing off. Now that's kind of way out of left field if you're thinking about writing a novel, but it was those oral histories that gave me that framework.
Well,
Uh,
it's funny. You never know what's going to inspire you.
that's true. Boy, that's for sure.
Can you tell us about the defining moment in your life when you realized that you were a writer? This is what you want to do.
Well, I'm sure I was a little kid because I went to college to get my English degree, but when I was a kid, I was a reader. This will sound maybe arrogant, but I read a book a day. I really did. I can remember one day, I tell this story a lot actually, where there was a pit at the library in like fifth grade, and in the pit was all the fiction books. And some teacher came by and saw me looking down into the pit, and I must have looked really forlorn. And she asked me what was wrong with me. And I said, I read them all. She looked at me with, what? I said, yeah, except for those romance books for girls. I've read all of them. She looked at me with complete amazement, said, "Come with me." And then she took me back to the nonfiction novels where biographies were. And bam, I fell in love with biographies. I still love reading biographies. And that opened up a whole different world for me. So somewhere in there, I figured I'd be writing myself. For me, I guess the quest was not so much was I a writer, what kind of writer? For a long time, the thing was, oh, well, you want to be a fiction writer. Well, for like 30 years of my life, I guess it mostly was nonfiction. I never knew it was going to go that way. It kind of started off as a scholarship and that branched off into writing encyclopedia entries and all kinds of different stuff. And then ended up writing the spy books, which was really off the wall. When you got a PhD and you're writing about American literature, and all of a sudden you're writing about TV spy shows, yeah. And then there was about 10 years. I was a fairly decently noted poet down in Texas when I lived down there, and I came out of nowhere. And so as that kind of writer, I didn't think I had a gift for fiction for a long, long, long time. And all of a sudden I started doing that. It's kind of hard to know what logs are going to kick over as you go along, I guess. Does that make any sense?
It does, actually. It does. I always thought I would be writing a certain type of fiction, and I find myself writing all kinds of fiction.
Yeah.
You kind of never know.
Yeah, back to those surprises.
Yeah, the surprises are good sometimes.
A lot of times.
Well, so you've read a lot, apparently.
Yeah.
I'm kind of envious of your amount of reading, the sheer amount. Well, do you now these days? Do you read more indie books or trade books, or do you read more, kind of an even mix of both?
It's a mix. I don't really keep track as to whether they're indie or trade. I don't even think of it in those concepts. Because a lot of my reading I do is because I get assigned. Because I read a lot of book reviews for a website called bookpleasures.com. In fact, I just sent off some requests for some of the books. The editor sends off this list of all these books he's got, available for review. And then you said back, hey, I'm interested in that one or that one. And then you bid fairly, or he knows you and he knows what you do. So I got a couple of rock books because I love rock and roll and I love reading about rock and roll. So I got a couple of those books for today. Well, I forgot where I was going. What was the question? Oh, trade or indie. And a lot of times I get things from publishers and editors who've liked my reviews of other books. And so I'll get correspondence from them saying, hey, Sam Marquis's got a new novel out. Would you like to review it? Well, I guess so. Sure, why not? And it's just kind of hard to say. I get a bunch of books across my desk, but I don't really worry about whether they're indie or trade or not. Well, plus I get a lot of books through the Library of Congress. Since I'm blind, we get free books. It used to be on tape. It's not on tape anymore. You download them into your computer, and you copy them over for reading a little device. I got a little device called the Victor Stream that I carry around with me, and have books in there and put in my headphones and just read.
That's cool. I like that you don't distinguish between the two. I ask mostly because I like to try to give more exposure to the indies, so that's why I ask. Who would be your favorite trade author? Who would be your favorite indie author? And you may not have a favorite for both. You may just have a favorite kind of in general for all, and that's fine.
Oh man, it is really tough. There are certain authors I tend to read. I've read some books of theirs, and if they got more coming out, I will. Like Samuel Marquis I mentioned earlier. Man, that guy knows his history. And I've read a lot of his books about World War II and about Cold War espionage. And then I just got one the other day that I started on that's about Blackbeard the pirate. It's kind of setting this, the record straight, I suppose. I just only read 10 pages so far. I mean, that guy can go anywhere in history and give you all of the detail that makes it so believable and takes you to those places. He's got that kind of gift that I really kind of envy, where people can take you to settings and places and take you to characters and you believe everything you're reading. I love that.
Yeah, that's what I look for too. So, do you prefer a story that wows you with its world building, or one that really hits you in the feels department, really gets you emotionally?
I would say of the if going to go one extreme or the other, I'd say the emotional thing because that's really hard to do. Because some those authors that can get really melodramatic, or they can give you the same old scenes and punch the same old buttons, and it's tough to to make for an emotional appeal. Are you going to kill a character off, or are you going to let the protagonist and the female go off as lovers? Are you going to break them up? All that kind of stuff. In terms of world building, I sometimes think that can get to be a bit ridiculous. Like me, created three whole planets. Talk about world building, fairly intimate detail. But I can't remember the name of the book. Is one I just read last month. That's all the book was world building,
Mm,
and to me that kind of got to be a bit.
we need a little more.
Yeah, you need some character development. You need some stories, and I just didn't feel. I didn't really care about any of the characters. They were just kind of walking around in this elaborate um, milieu. Well, okay, whoop de doo. People do that all the time. I didn't see anything especially interesting in that.
Yeah, you need some tension. You
Hmm.
need something.
You need a reason for these people to do what they're doing.
Yeah, they need some motivation.
Yep.
Can you name a few indie authors that you have read that you wish more people knew about?
I did. I knew you were going to ask that. And that was, in fact, before we got into this interview, I went back through my reviews from last year, trying to look around. Okay, do I have any specific writers here? Well, I'll give some plugs out. Eric Michael Craig is an author that I like to toss out as a sci-fi author that people should know about. If you like really strange sci-fi, there's Andy Zack and his zombie turkeys and zombie mother-in-laws. I think that's kind of funny stuff. Um, as Preston Fleming for spy books is really pretty good. Samuel Marquis I mentioned. Oh, Peter Borchert, who's a South African writer who touches all kinds of genres. He's one that's thrillers in some cases, um, adventure yarns. I guess is the best genre you can plug him into. I guess, but every book I read by him, I have no idea what's going to happen because he's just so versatile. But well, those are a few names I can remember off the top of my head.
You read so many. I'm sure it's hard for you to keep track of all the
That's it
names.
exactly. It is really tough.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years as far as your writing? Do you have a goal in mind?
I don't have a goal in mind in terms of an end point or a specific point. I hope that I keep evolving. I hope that I keep developing. I kind of like it when I'm working on writing, and I'll surprise myself. Or, oh, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know. Well, that is a lot better. I wish I knew how to write like this when I wrote that. I want to keep evolving. I want to keep learning. I want to move to new levels. And that's really, really hard to put down like a 10-point plan. Accomplish this by that, and accomplish that by that.
It
I,
still is a
I
goal, though. I mean, it's still something that you could, you know, give you drive, something to push towards.
get better and better. Yeah, that's always what I'm trying to do. Not always sure that I accomplish it, but that's more
Uh,
believable characters, more
yeah.
charismatic characters, more magnetic characters. Yeah, because for all my books, to be honest, if you don't care about the characters, they're dead.
Oh yeah.
You've got
I
to care about
I
these
honestly
people.
think that should be every writer's goal. At least one of their goals is to try to constantly learn, try to constantly improve on their own writing because you don't want to get stale. You know, you
Yeah,
want to keep
plus, if you
trying
look
to
at all the
improve.
competition out there, you got to be able to try to hold your own up against. There's quite a few really good writers out there. There's quite a
Oh yeah.
few great writers out there. There's people win awards for a reason.
Oh yes.
It's to try to put yourself in that same community is really kind of tough. I think it's for some people rather bold if they're really going to try, and choose something rather than just toss out the same old, same old. There's a lot of that too.
What advice would you give to independent or self-published authors, especially those that are just starting out? Whether they're starting out just writing or they're just starting out with the whole publishing and marketing, what advice would you give to them?
Be in it for the long haul. I guess the most basic advice I give to anybody is right. I've heard a lot of writers talk about what they're going to do and talk about what they're going to do and talk about what they're going to do, and then spend their whole day on Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is that they're doing, and they don't write anything because they're busy screwing around. You got to push all that stuff to the side and actually write. I think that's the most basic thing, for a lot of writers is do it. And again, being there for the long haul. It's going to be every writer's story is different. Some are going to have quick and easy success. Others are going to struggle, like me, forever and ever and ever. Others are going to attract an audience bit by bit. Um, Everybody's story is completely different, so it's kind of weird to try to give advice to other people because they're probably better off giving me advice. I'm the one who needs to listen to the advice. But write and stick to it, and if it's important to you, hang in there.
Just keep writing is a good advice
Yeah,
because, like you said, it's so easy to get distracted and to talk about it, to think about it. And I have this idea, but you need to actually sit down and really write. You're never going to improve your craft if you're not doing it in the first place. That is good advice.
yeah. You got to hit it, and even if you feel like you got writer's block coming, give it a shot. You might be surprised. Sometimes that writer's block will crumble if you're telling a story, and the story will come. Sometimes it's like I think Bob Dylan used to say that he didn't write the songs came to him. I still think for a lot of my stuff, I'm not so sure I created any of my characters. I think they created themselves, and I just had to try to find a way to put them into words.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you just have to sit and just write crap for a while.
Yeah, yeah. It's like not everything you write needs to be seen by somebody else. Boy, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, but that can still help you. It can still move you forward.
Yes.
So it can't hurt.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for dropping by doing this interview tonight. It was great talking to you.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, we touched on a lot of different subjects here.
Oh yeah, definitely have to check out some of these other authors you were talking about. And I have the links for your Facebook and your website in the comments for our viewers to come check out your books.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh yes. Is there anything else you would like to say before we sign off?
Uh, well, like I said earlier, check out one of my websites or blogs and get the link to the newsletter. As soon as we get 200 followers, then we will be able to send out a lot more stuff to people for free, like that short story, Murder in the Canyon, it's called. You're hearing it here for the very first time. Exclusive information.
All right. I hope everybody checks it out. I'm definitely going to check it out. All right. Thanks again for coming in by tonight. And I guess we're signing off. So, bye.
Thanks, Ashley. Talk to you later sometime.
All right.
Bye
Bye.
bye.